I'm very honored to be talking to you and to CEOs and business leaders, and of course the good people at Bridge Alliance about really what is the fundamental, most important issue that we are facing as a country, which is our ever shrinking democracy. American Promise stands for getting big money out of our political system. We've unfortunately seen the oversized influence that big money has, and it just keeps on getting larger and larger. $14 billion was spent in the 2020 elections compared to $7 billion in the 2016. So we've almost doubled, we've over doubled the amount of money that's coming in. And we're seeing that states that have never really had large bills when it came to elections like Maine and South Carolina, toppling over $200 million in campaign spending in 2020. And most of that money is coming from out-of-state interests that have no real connection to the state that they're spending this money in. We see over 90% of the outside money that came into Maine, of the money that came into Maine came from outside influences. So American Promise is having a conversation in kitchen tables and boardrooms across the country, from Maine to Alaska and all parts in between, to talk about the influence of money and how Americans can help restore and regain our voice in the political system, which is now currently being drowned out by wealthy millionaires, billionaires, and corporate special interests. Well, first off, ending big money in politics with a constitutional amendment has been supported by a majority of Americans. Over 70% of Americans actually support a constitutional amendment to end big money in politics. And we see a majority of political party members also support this. We have over 60% of Republicans support the idea, over 90% of Democrats, and over 60% of independents all support using a constitutional amendment to ban big money from our political elections. So the American people are behind this issue. Of all of the issues that are out there on the world stage and on the national stage, you really think about it, there's not a lot that unites Americans. But on the issue of reforming our national elections and getting money out of politics, we're all united. So really right now we have the need for the political will, for the representative government to catch up to where the people are. So we're looking to see some people in the United States House of Representatives and Senate to introduce legislation that would do just that, to amend the Constitution to end big money. But make no mistake about it, this is something that the American people want. This is something the American people have expressed repeatedly, and it doesn't matter what political party or political persuasion you are. Americans want to return democracy back to them, give power back to the people, get power out of the corporations and billionaires, and finally get big money and its outsized influence that it has in our campaigns and elections out of our political process. Yeah, well, the gist of it is to take unlimited spending and make it illegal to spend unlimited money in our political elections, our national elections for president, United States Congress and Senate, and so forth. And so that is the role, kind of to rein in this kind of dark money, or these secretive PACs that raise money from who knows where, from whom knows where, and then spend it. So we're zeroing in on that, and that's what the amendment will accomplish. And once the money is out of politics, then, we'll see a more representative government. We'll see some of these systemic issues that have plagued our country, whether they're in the climate change or gun manufacturing, education. All of these issues are weighed down by money in politics. So once we see the money get out of politics, we'll be able to have an actual debate on some of these systemic problems that really face our country, and really dive into these problems and solve them once and for all when money's not playing that big role. Well, not only that, but they've been actually calling for widespread, real systematic change and real reform to the campaign finance system. Yes, that's what you say. One of the silver linings of the horror events that we saw on January 6th is that we see businesses, main CEOs and leaders coming up and saying that businesses need to redefine their role in the political process and the way that they use money to get their political agenda accomplished. The CEO of Unilever, the former CEO of Unilever, Paul Pullman, recently just came out with an op-ed challenging CEOs to support a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics, because he understands the runaway system is not good for business. And we have small business owners, obviously, who are frustrated going up against corporate dollars and feel like they can't spend enough to have their voices heard, even though they have legitimate concerns. And this affects business, because business should not be based on who you be able to give political favors to. It should be based on innovation and your ideas in the marketplace and fair competition. And when you have corporations and billionaires who are spending millions upon millions to influence elections, the small business owner, it's not a fair competition, and it's not a level playing field. So businesses, small and large, understand that the role that money they've been using needs to be reexamined, just like the way that we need to reexamine all of the things regarding to our democracy, whether it's voting rights or voting reform or the way that we conduct our election in the face of what just happened in November. And I think that it's really important and it's really encouraging that businesses have stepped up and said, we need to reexamine money and we need to get it out of our politics. Well, we achieved this objective by running and talking to American people. And we talk to Americans in key states and every state about this issue and about what issue affects you and why do you see that there is no movement on that issue. And the root cause of all of this is money in politics. So like I said, the conversation starts at kitchen tables and in boardrooms across the country. And then it goes to the elected officials, to the people who the elected officials listen to, the groups that they belong to, the organizations that support them. This is a grassroots citizen-led issue. And so we've always seen that when things are led from the grassroots, and even from a constitutional amendment perspective, you look at the constitutional amendments of the past, of civil rights and voting rights and so forth, they all were grassroots campaigns that bubbled up into the top, where the leaders, even though they had a self-vested interest, could no longer ignore the voice of the people. So our campaign, our job is to educate and ignite and activate the people, so the elected officials hear exactly that 70% of people who want this constitutional amendment. And when the American people are speaking in one unified voice, you can't ignore it. Well, absolutely. There's no doubt about it that voter turnout was at an all-time high in the 2020 elections. But you go back to the watching television without the negative ads and so forth. I mean, think about those times leading up to the elections. Let's go back to Maine, for instance, with $27 million spent on advertising, and all but $100,000 of it was a positive ad. So you're talking about millions upon millions of negative ads flooding your airways. And these negative ads, unfortunately, aren't talking about the issues that are important to people in Maine or important to the people across the country. They're talking about personal attacks. It's misleading. It's disinformation. It's not an honest talk about the issues that face us. So yes, more voters came out and more voters voted in states that had ever voted before, and nationwide voter turnout was at an all-time high. But what were we voting for? What issue was driving us? What were we going to the polls to see? All of those people came out not to vote for climate change action or for Medicare for all. It came out to vote for a political party, the same political party that's spending millions upon millions of dollars spending to get you to vote for them. But the issues are not really driving the concern of the voters. They are, but the people in Washington really aren't listening. So I always say that, yes, we had a great election in terms of turnout and enthusiasm, but we still, at the end of the day, didn't get the American people to say exactly what we wanted out of our politicians. The issues weren't there, and all of that money just went into a flood of negativity and disinformation, whereas we were just waiting for election day so we can turn off the television and not have to hear it and see it anymore. They often say that, the number one driver for early voting is for people because they've made up their mind and don't want to have to be engaged in the political process anymore. They don't want to have to see the ads. They don't want to have to see the mail. They just want to make their decision and close the door and move on with their lives. So, if we were spending all this money on policy proposals and think tanks and coming up with situations that we can actually move policy to make the lives of American people better, then that might be something, but we're not. We're spending it on misinformation, negative campaigning, and distortions and lies. And that's not exactly a positive political process. Well, we've tried to reform the system. We've tried disclosure. I've approved these messages and all of that stuff. But I mean, it really hasn't changed the fundamental of the games. The money's still flowing in from sources from not. And look, the other thing about this is it's not as if like money is being funded by millions and millions of Americans. We're talking about 300 donors that are giving the majority of these millions of dollars that we're seeing spent on negative ads. So we're talking about over 300 million Americans who don't have that equal kind of voice. So this system is being really dominated by a chosen few. And that's also really alarming when you realize that there are about 300 people out there who are pulling the strings in Washington, D.C. and making sure that who gets elected and who doesn't get elected and what issues are pursued.